In the glittering halls of the Kingdom of Astoria, where ancient traditions clash with modern hearts, Crown Prince Alexander faces the ultimate test of loyalty. His beloved wife, Princess Elena, stands accused of treason by the vengeful Queen Regent Victoria, his own stepmother, who will stop at nothing to secure her own bloodline's claim to the throne. When palace guards receive orders to arrest the future queen, Alexander must make a choice that will either save his marriage or destroy his kingdom. Some lines, once crossed, can never be uncrossed. Some ultimatums demand everything. In a world where whispers carry more weight than weapons and family bonds can become the deadliest chains, one man's stand for love will shake the very foundations of the crown itself. The question isn't whether Alexander will protect Elena, it's whether the kingdom will survive his protection. The morning mist clung to the windows of Astoria Palace like secrets waiting to be revealed. Crown Prince Alexander stood in his private study, watching the sun struggle to break through the gray clouds that seemed to mirror his mood. At 32, he had learned that royal life was a delicate balance between public duty and private desires, but nothing had prepared him for the storm that was about to engulf his family. Elena, his wife of 3 years, sat gracefully at the antique writing desk, her auburn hair catching the pale light as she penned thank-you notes to local charities. She moved with the quiet confidence that had first captured his heart during a diplomatic dinner in neighboring Valeria. Her beauty was undeniable, but it was her intelligence and compassion that had convinced him she would make an exceptional queen. The Children's Hospital fundraiser raised more than expected, Elena said, glancing up with a smile that still made his heart skip. Dr. Morrison says they can finally upgrade the pediatric wing. Alexander nodded, though his mind was elsewhere. He had spent the previous evening in an increasingly heated discussion with Queen Regent Victoria, his stepmother, who had made it clear that Elena's growing popularity among the people was becoming what she termed a problem. Victoria had ruled as regent since Alexander's father, King Frederick, had suffered a stroke 2 years ago, leaving him unable to fulfill his royal duties. The arrangement was supposed to be temporary, but Victoria seemed to relish the power more with each passing month. Alexander? Elena's voice drew him back to the present. You seem troubled. What did Victoria want to discuss last night? Before he could answer, a sharp knock echoed through the study. Captain Marcus Webb, head of the Royal Guard, entered with the formal stiffness that Alexander had learned to read as a warning sign. Marcus had served the royal family for 15 years, and his loyalty was unquestioned, but the tension in his shoulders suggested he brought unwelcome news. Your Highness, Marcus said, his voice carefully neutral. Queen Regent Victoria requests an immediate audience in the throne room. Both Your Highness and Princess Elena are to attend. Alexander felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. Victoria rarely called formal audiences unless she intended to make a point that would echo through the palace corridors for weeks. Did she specify the nature of this meeting? No, Your Highness. However, Marcus hesitated, his professional composure cracking slightly. There are additional guards posted outside the throne room. Palace security has been elevated. Elena set down her pen, her intuition clearly sensing the undercurrents of tension. Has something happened? Is the king unwell? His Majesty's condition remains stable, Marcus replied. The Queen Regent awaits your presence. As they walked through the marble corridors toward the throne room, Alexander noticed the subtle changes Marcus had mentioned. Guards stood at attention every few yards, their expressions more rigid than usual. Servants hurried past without making eye contact, and the normal buzz of palace activity felt muted, as if the very walls were holding their breath. The throne room of Astoria Palace was a monument to 5 centuries of royal history. Massive columns supported a vaulted ceiling painted with scenes of ancient victories, while stained glass windows cast colored light across the polished floor. The throne of Astoria, carved from black marble and inlaid with silver, sat at the far end of the room like a judgment seat. Victoria stood before the throne, though protocol dictated that only the reigning monarch should occupy it. At 58, she remained striking, her silver hair perfectly styled, and her blue eyes sharp with intelligence and ambition. She had married Alexander's father when Alexander was 16, making her both stepmother and potential rival for influence over the crown. Alexander had initially welcomed her presence, hoping she would help ease his father's loneliness after his mother's death, but he had grown to understand that Victoria's affections came with strings attached. Alexander. Elena. Victoria's voice carried across the vast space with practiced authority. And thank you for attending so promptly. As they approached, Alexander noticed that several members of the Privy Council flanked Victoria, including Lord Chancellor Harrison and Defense Minister Grant. Their presence suggested this was not a family discussion but an official proceeding. Alexander felt Elena's hand briefly touch his arm, a subtle gesture of support that did not go unnoticed by those assembled. "Aunt Victoria," Alexander said, using the informal title that had become habit over the years. Captain Webb indicated this was urgent. Victoria's smile was thin and controlled. "Indeed it is. We have received disturbing intelligence regarding activities that threaten the stability of the crown." She paused, allowing her words to settle in the silence. "It has come to our attention that certain individuals within the palace have been engaging in correspondence with foreign agents." Elena stepped forward slightly, her diplomatic training evident in her composed demeanor. "That's very concerning. How can we assist in addressing this security threat?" "You can start by explaining your communications with the Valerian embassy," Victoria said, her tone shifting from formal to accusatory. "Particularly your recent discussions with Ambassador Castellano regarding Astoria's domestic policies." Alexander felt the ground shift beneath him. Ambassador Castellano was Elena's cousin, and their conversations were family correspondence, not diplomatic espionage. But in Victoria's hands, family ties could be twisted into evidence of divided loyalties. "Ambassador Castellano is my cousin," Elena replied calmly. "Our correspondence consists of personal family matters and occasional discussions about charitable initiatives that might benefit both our kingdoms." "Surely the palace monitors all diplomatic communications." "Indeed we do," Lord Chancellor Harrison interjected, stepping forward with a folder of documents. "Which is why these particular exchanges have raised concerns. Princess Elena, you have shared information about internal palace discussions, including details about the king's health and succession planning." Alexander's anger flared. "Those are private family conversations that Elena has every right to discuss with her family. She is my wife and the future queen of this kingdom." Victoria's eyes glittered with something that might have been satisfaction. "That future is precisely what concerns us, Alexander. Elena's loyalties appear to be divided between Astoria and Valeria. In troubled times, we cannot afford to have foreign influences so close to the throne." The accusation hung in the air like a blade. Alexander understood now that this was not about security or Elena's correspondence. This was about succession and power. Victoria had never fully accepted that Alexander would inherit the throne, and Elena's presence made that inheritance more secure and more distant from Victoria's own ambitions. "What exactly are you suggesting?" Alexander asked, his voice dangerously quiet. Victoria straightened. "Assuming the full authority of her regent status, I am recommending that Princess Elena be temporarily relocated to guest quarters while we conduct a thorough investigation into these security concerns, for the safety of the kingdom and the integrity of the crown." The words hit Alexander like physical blows. Temporary relocation was royal language for house arrest. Victoria was not just questioning Elena's loyalty. She was moving to remove her from the line of succession entirely. Elena remained remarkably composed, though Alexander could see the slight tremor in her hands. "I understand your concerns for the kingdom's security," she said. "I am willing to cooperate fully with any investigation. However, I hope you understand that these accusations are both hurtful and unfounded." "Cooperation is appreciated," Victoria replied. "Captain Webb will escort you to the East Wing immediately. Your belongings will be transferred, and your communications will be monitored until this matter is resolved." Alexander stepped protectively closer to Elena. "This is unnecessary and insulting. Elena has done nothing wrong, and I will not allow her to be treated like a criminal based on twisted interpretations of innocent family correspondence." Victoria's mask of regality slipped slightly, revealing the steel beneath. "Alexander, you are allowing your personal feelings to cloud your judgment regarding the kingdom's security. As Crown Prince, your first duty is to Astoria, not to your wife's comfort." "My first duty is to justice and truth," Alexander replied, his voice rising. "And the truth is that Elena has committed no crime except marrying me and becoming too popular for your comfort." The throne room fell silent except for the echo of his words against the ancient stones. Victoria's face hardened into an expression of cold fury that Alexander had seen before, usually directed at those who dared to challenge her authority. "Captain Webb," Victoria commanded, "please escort Princess Elena to her new quarters immediately." Marcus stepped forward reluctantly, his discomfort obvious. "Your Highness," he addressed Elena with respectful formality. Alexander moved to stand between Marcus and Elena. "No, I will not allow this injustice to proceed." Victoria's voice cut through the tension like a blade. "Alexander, you will stand down immediately, or you will be removed from the line of succession for defying the lawful orders of the regent." The threat was real and devastating. Alexander knew that Victoria had the legal authority to make such a decision, particularly with the Privy Council's support. His removal would leave the succession open to challenge, potentially allowing Victoria to install her own choice or even claim the throne herself. But as he looked at Elena, seeing the quiet dignity with which she faced this ordeal, Alexander realized that some things mattered more than crowns and titles. His father had taught him that a king's greatest responsibility was to protect those who could not protect themselves. Today, that included his wife. "Elena," he said, turning to face her directly, "you will not be going anywhere." Victoria's voice rose with royal indignation. "Alexander, you are making a grave mistake that will have consequences far beyond this room." "Then, so be it," Alexander replied, his decision crystallizing with each word. "But I will not abandon my wife to satisfy your political ambitions." The confrontation had reached a point of no return. Alexander could see the calculations running behind Victoria's eyes as she weighed her options. The Privy Council members shifted nervously, understanding that they were witnessing a fundamental break in the royal family that would reshape the kingdom's future. Captain Webb remained frozen in position, caught between conflicting authorities and his own conscience. The other guards in the room looked to him for direction, but Marcus appeared as uncertain as everyone else about how to proceed. "Very well," Victoria said finally, her voice deadly calm. "If you choose to prioritize your wife over your kingdom, then you must live with the consequences. Sip it. Guard Commander Blackwood will handle Princess Elena's relocation." Alexander's blood ran cold. Commander Richard Blackwood was Victoria's personal appointment to the palace guard, a man whose loyalty to the regent was absolute and whose methods were notoriously harsh. Unlike Captain Webb, who had served under Alexander's father and maintained traditional concepts of honor, Blackwood viewed opposition to Victoria as treason to be crushed. As if summoned by his name, Commander Blackwood entered the throne room with 6 guards bearing the regent's personal insignia. His presence changed the atmosphere immediately, bringing with it an air of barely contained violence that made even the Privy Council members step back. "Commander," Victoria addressed him with obvious satisfaction, "please escort Princess Elena to the secure quarters in the East Wing. She is to remain there until further notice." Blackwood's smile was predatory. "With pleasure, Your Majesty." Alexander felt Elena's hand slip into his, a gesture of solidarity that strengthened his resolve. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The die was cast, and there could be no retreat from this moment. As Blackwood and his guards advanced across the marble floor, their footsteps echoing like a drumbeat of inevitability, Alexander prepared to make his stand. The throne room, which had witnessed centuries of royal decisions, was about to witness the beginning of a royal rebellion that would either save his marriage or destroy his kingdom. The morning mist had finally lifted from the palace windows, but the storm within the royal family was just beginning to break. Commander Blackwood approached with the confident stride of a man accustomed to having his orders followed without question. Behind him, the 6 guards moved in perfect formation, their black uniforms marking them as Victoria's personal force rather than the traditional royal guard. Alexander noticed that Captain Webb had positioned himself slightly closer to Elena, a subtle shift that suggested his own loyalties were being tested. "Princess Elena," Blackwood said, his voice carrying mock courtesy, "if you would please come with us voluntarily, this process will be much simpler for everyone involved." Elena raised her chin, meeting Blackwood's gaze directly. "I appreciate your politeness, Commander, but I must respectfully decline. I have committed no crime and I will not submit to unlawful imprisonment." The refusal sent ripples of tension through the assembled group. Lord Chancellor Harrison cleared his throat nervously, while Defense Minister Grant shuffled his papers as if seeking escape in bureaucratic details. Victoria's eyes narrowed with displeasure at Elena's defiance. "Princess," Blackwood continued, his tone hardening, "I have direct orders from the Queen Regent. Your cooperation is not optional." Alexander stepped forward, placing himself directly in Blackwood's path. "Commander, I am ordering you to stand down. Princess Elena will not be moved from this room without my permission." Blackwood's laugh was short and humorless. "Your Highness, with all due respect, you do not currently have the authority to countermand the Queen Regent's orders. Perhaps you should consider the wisdom of stepping aside." The threat was barely veiled, and Alexander felt his anger surge. "Are you threatening the Crown Prince of Astoria, Commander?" "I am following lawful orders from the current ruler of this kingdom," Blackwood replied smoothly. "If those orders conflict with your personal preferences, that is unfortunate but irrelevant." Captain Webb finally spoke, his voice cutting through the tension. "Commander Blackwood, might I suggest we resolve this matter through proper channels? Perhaps a private consultation with the Queen Regent would be appropriate before proceeding with such serious actions." Blackwood turned his cold gaze on Webb. "Captain, your services are not required here. The Queen Regent has specifically requested that her personal guard handle this sensitive matter." The dismissal of Webb was another calculated move by Victoria, removing the one security officer in the room who might question her orders. Alexander realized that every element of this confrontation had been carefully planned. Victoria had not acted impulsively. This was a carefully orchestrated coup against Elena's position in the royal family. "Elena," Alexander said, turning to his wife, "do you trust me?" Her answer came without hesitation. "With my life." "Then stay close to me, no matter what happens." Alexander faced the assembled group, his voice carrying the authority he had been trained to project since childhood. "I am invoking my right as Crown Prince to demand a full hearing before the Privy Council regarding these allegations against my wife. Until such a hearing can be convened, Princess Elena remains under my personal protection." Victoria's composure finally cracked. "Alexander, you are being foolish beyond measure. These allegations are serious and substantiated. Your emotional attachment is preventing you from seeing clearly." "My emotional attachment," Alexander replied, his voice rising, "is called loyalty. It is called justice. It is called protecting the innocent from false accusations motivated by political ambition." The accusation of political motivation struck home, and Victoria's face flushed with anger. "How dare you suggest that my actions are motivated by anything other than the security of this kingdom?"
"Because I know you, Victoria," Alexander shot back.
"I have watched you maneuver and manipulate for years, waiting for your opportunity to remove any obstacles to your own power. Elena's growing popularity threatens your influence, and you cannot tolerate that." The naked truth hung in the air like a sword. The Privy Council members exchanged uncomfortable glances, recognizing the accuracy of Alexander's assessment, but unwilling to openly challenge the regent who controlled their positions. Lord Chancellor Harrison attempted to mediate. "Perhaps we could arrange for Princess Elena to remain in her current quarters while the investigation proceeds. A compromise that addresses security concerns without appearing punitive." "No," Victoria said sharply. "The security risks are too significant for half measures. Princess Elena will be properly secured in appropriate quarters immediately." Alexander saw Blackwood signal subtly to his guards, who began to spread out in a flanking pattern designed to surround Elena. The tactical movement confirmed that this confrontation was moving beyond verbal disagreement toward potential physical confrontation. "Commander," Alexander said, his voice carrying deadly warning, "if you or your men lay one hand on my wife, you will answer to me personally." Blackwood's smile was genuinely amused now. "Your Highness, while I respect your passion for protecting your wife, you must understand that you are vastly outnumbered. Perhaps discretion would be the better part of valor in this situation."
Elena stepped closer to Alexander, her voice calm but firm.
"Alexander, I appreciate your protection, but I will not allow you to sacrifice your position for me. The kingdom needs you as heir." "The kingdom needs justice more than it needs an heir," Alexander replied. "And justice demands that I protect you from this persecution." Captain Webb moved slightly, positioning himself between the advancing guards and the royal couple. Commander Blackwood, I must point out that any action against the Crown Prince could be considered treason. Are you prepared to accept responsibility for such charges? Blackwood's eyes glittered dangerously. Captain Webb, are you threatening me? I am reminding you of the legal implications of your actions, Webb replied steadily. The Crown Prince has invoked his right to protect his wife until proper proceedings can be arranged. Forcibly removing her against his direct orders could be construed as an attack on the royal family itself. The legal complexity gave everyone pause. Victoria had carefully constructed a scenario where she had apparent authority, but Alexander's position as Crown Prince created competing claims of authority that murked the legal waters. Alexander seized the moment of uncertainty. I propose an alternative, he announced. If the Queen Regent is genuinely concerned about security, then let Elena remain in our quarters under guard supervision until a proper tribunal can be convened. This addresses security concerns while maintaining appropriate treatment for a member of the royal family. Victoria's expression suggested she was weighing the proposal, but Alexander could see the calculation behind her eyes. Any delay allowed Elena to remain close to him and potentially rally support among the palace staff and nobles who had grown fond of her. Unacceptable, Victoria declared. The investigation requires complete separation to ensure no compromise of evidence or witness testimony. Defense Minister Grant finally spoke up. Your Majesty, if I may suggest, perhaps we could arrange for neutral quarters in the diplomatic wing. This would provide appropriate security while maintaining Princess Elena's dignity and status. Alexander was about to respond when the massive doors of the throne room opened with a resonant boom that echoed through the chamber. King Frederick entered, supported by his aide, but walking under his own power. Despite the stroke that had weakened him, he still commanded immediate attention and respect from everyone present. The king's appearance was shocking in its timing and impact. His left side remained affected by the stroke, and his speech was slower than before, but his eyes were alert and focused. Alexander realized that his father must have been informed of the confrontation and summoned the strength to intervene personally. What? King Frederick said carefully, his words deliberate, is happening in my throne room? Victoria immediately moved toward him, her demeanor shifting to concerned care. Frederick, you should not be exerting yourself. The doctors said complete rest was essential for your recovery. The king ignored her, his gaze moving slowly across the assembled group before settling on Alexander and Elena. My son, Elena, are you well? We are well, father, Alexander replied. But we are facing false accusations that threaten Elena's freedom and our marriage. King Frederick's attention turned to Victoria, and Alexander saw something flicker in his father's eyes that suggested his mental faculties were clearer than anyone had assumed. Victoria, explain these accusations. Victoria's carefully prepared presentation suddenly seemed inadequate when faced with her husband's direct question. Frederick, we have discovered evidence that Princess Elena has been sharing sensitive information with foreign agents. For the security of the kingdom, she must be detained pending investigation. The king's response was slow but decisive. Show me this evidence. Lord Chancellor Harrison stepped forward with his folder, but King Frederick's gesture stopped him. No, but I want to hear it directly from Victoria. What evidence? Victoria's composure began to show cracks under her husband's steady gaze. Communications with the Valerian embassy, discussions of internal palace matters, information about your health and succession planning. Letters to her cousin, King Frederick said flatly. Family correspondence about family matters. Frederick, you do not understand the security implications, Victoria began. But the king raised his hand for silence. I understand, he said carefully, that my daughter-in-law is being accused of treason for discussing family matters with family members. His gaze moved to Commander Blackwood and his guards. And I understand that armed men are threatening my son and his wife in my throne room. The king's clear grasp of the situation stunned everyone present. Alexander realized that his father had been far more aware of palace politics than anyone had assumed, and his apparent weakness had masked a sharp intelligence that was now fully focused on the crisis at hand. Commander Blackwood, the king continued, You will remove yourself and your guards from this room immediately. Blackwood looked uncertainly at Victoria, who appeared increasingly isolated as her husband's authority reasserted itself. Your Majesty, the Queen Regent ordered— I am still King of Astoria, Frederick interrupted, his voice gaining strength. My orders supersede all others in this kingdom. Leave, now. The dismissal was absolute, and Blackwood had no choice but to retreat with his guards, their tactical formation dissolving into an embarrassed withdrawal. As the doors closed behind them, the atmosphere in the throne room shifted dramatically. King Frederick turned his full attention to Victoria, and Alexander saw his stepmother's carefully constructed authority beginning to crumble under her husband's scrutiny. Victoria, the king said quietly, we need to talk privately. Alexander felt a surge of relief mixed with uncertainty. His father's intervention had prevented Elena's immediate arrest, but the underlying conflict remained unresolved. Victoria's ambitions had not disappeared, and she would undoubtedly regroup and attempt another approach. Elena moved closer to him, her voice barely audible. Your father is stronger than we thought. Much stronger, Alexander agreed. But this is far from over. As the king and Victoria moved toward a private chamber for their confrontation, Alexander realized that the battle for Elena's freedom and their marriage had only shifted to new ground. The ultimate resolution would require more than his father's intervention. It would require a fundamental restructuring of palace politics and power relationships. The morning that had begun with accusations and threats was evolving into something much more complex and potentially revolutionary. Alexander held Elena's hand tightly, knowing that whatever came next would test not only their love, but the very foundation of the kingdom they were meant to inherit. The private chambers adjacent to the throne room had witnessed countless royal conferences throughout the centuries, but none quite like the confrontation between King Frederick and Queen Regent Victoria. Alexander and Elena waited in the main throne room with Captain Webb and the increasingly uncomfortable Privy Council members, the silence broken only by the muffled sounds of heated discussion from behind the massive oak doors. Lord Chancellor Harrison repeatedly checked his pocket watch, while Defense Minister Grant shuffled through papers with nervous energy. The other council members whispered among themselves, undoubtedly calculating how to position themselves if the power structure of the kingdom was about to shift dramatically. Captain Webb approached Alexander discreetly. Your Highness, might I suggest that we prepare for various contingencies? Commander Blackwood and his men have not left the palace, merely relocated to the courtyard. Alexander nodded grimly. Through the tall windows he could see Blackwood's black-uniformed guards maintaining their formation in the stone courtyard below, ready to respond to whatever orders emerged from the royal conference. Captain, where do the loyalties of the regular guard lie? Alexander asked quietly. Webb's answer was measured but reassuring. The royal guard has served your family for generations, Your Highness. Their oath is to the crown and the rightful heir, not to political appointments. However, they are also trained to obey lawful orders, and the question of which orders are lawful in this situation remains complex. Elena moved to stand beside them, her diplomatic training evident in how she read the political undercurrents. What about the palace staff, the servants and administrators who keep this place functioning? Princess Elena, you have been very popular with the staff, Webb admitted. Your kindness to the servants and your interest in their welfare has been noticed and appreciated. That goodwill could prove valuable if this situation escalates. The doors to the private chamber suddenly opened, and King Frederick emerged alone. His face was grave, and the effort of the confrontation had clearly exhausted him, but his determination remained evident. Victoria followed several steps behind, her composed mask firmly in place but her eyes blazing with barely contained fury. Alexander! Elena, the king said, his voice carrying the weight of difficult decisions. Please join me. The rest of you are dismissed for now. As the Privy Council members filed out with obvious relief, Alexander noticed that Victoria remained standing near the throne, her position suggesting she had no intention of leaving. The dynamics of power were shifting, but the battle was far from over. King Frederick settled into a high-backed chair that had been brought for his comfort, gesturing for Alexander and Elena to sit nearby. Victoria remained standing, a tactical choice that allowed her to maintain a sense of authority and readiness for action. I have heard Victoria's concerns, the king began carefully. and I have explained my perspective on these allegations. The situation is more complex than it initially appeared. Alexander felt his heart sink. His father's diplomatic language suggested compromise rather than the clear vindication he had hoped for. However, the king continued, I am troubled by the methods being employed and the rush to judgment that seems to characterize this entire affair. Victoria stepped forward. Frederick, I understand your desire to protect family members, but the security of the kingdom must take precedence over personal feelings. The evidence of compromised communications cannot be ignored. The evidence, King Frederick replied with slow emphasis, consists of personal letters between family members discussing family matters. If such correspondence is now considered treasonous, then every noble family in the kingdom is guilty of similar crimes. Elena spoke for the first time since entering the chamber. Your Majesty, I want you to know that I would never do anything to harm Astoria or betray the trust you and Alexander have placed in me. My love for this kingdom and its people is genuine and absolute. The king's expression softened as he regarded his daughter-in-law. Elena, I have never doubted your loyalty or your character. You have brought great joy to Alexander and great service to our people. Victoria's jaw tightened at the praise, and Alexander saw her hands clench briefly before she forced them to relax. Every word of support for Elena was a reduction in Victoria's own position and influence. Nevertheless, the king continued, we must address the appearance of impropriety and the concerns that have been raised. I propose a formal investigation conducted by neutral parties, with Elena remaining free during the proceedings but with certain restrictions on her communications and movements. Alexander started to protest, but his father's raised hand stopped him. This is not a punishment but a necessary process to clear Elena's name completely and remove any doubt about her loyalty. Victoria's response was immediate and sharp. Frederick, that proposal is completely inapplicable. A formal investigation requires secure detention to prevent witness tampering and evidence destruction. Elena must be properly confined during the proceedings. Confined? King Frederick's voice rose despite his physical weakness. We are discussing my daughter-in-law, not a common criminal. She will be treated with the dignity appropriate to her position. Her position is exactly what is in question, Victoria shot back, her careful diplomacy finally cracking. If she has betrayed that position, then she deserves no special treatment. The argument was reaching another breaking point when Captain Webb appeared at the chamber entrance. Your Majesty, forgive the interruption, but there is an urgent matter requiring your attention. King Frederick gestured for him to continue, and Webb's next words sent shockwaves through the room. Ambassador Castellano from Valeria has arrived unexpectedly and is requesting immediate audience. He claims to have information directly relevant to the current situation. Elena gasped, her hand flying to her throat. Eduardo is here? But he wasn't scheduled to visit for another month. Victoria's eyes narrowed with suspicion. How convenient that Elena's cousin arrives precisely when she faces investigation for unauthorized communications with his embassy.
Alexander felt a chill of realization.
Ambassador Castellano's sudden appearance could be either salvation or disaster, depending on the information he brought. If Eduardo had come to clear Elena's name, it could end Victoria's accusations immediately. But if he brought evidence that supported the treason charges, Elena's situation would become hopeless. Escort Ambassador Castellano to the formal reception chamber, King Frederick decided. We will meet with him immediately. As they made their way through the palace corridors, Alexander noticed that word of the morning's events was spreading rapidly among the staff. Servants paused in their duties to curtsy or bow more deeply than usual, their expressions showing support for Elena and concern about the allegations. The sympathy was touching but also dangerous, as it confirmed Victoria's fears about Elena's growing influence. The reception chamber was smaller than the throne room but equally ornate, with portraits of Astorian kings and queens looking down from the walls like silent judges. Ambassador Eduardo Castellano was already waiting, his travel-stained clothes suggesting urgent haste rather than planned diplomacy. Eduardo was a tall, distinguished man in his 40s, with the olive skin and dark eyes common to the Valerian nobility. His resemblance to Elena was unmistakable, and his obvious affection for his cousin had always been clear during his previous visits. Your Majesty, Eduardo said, bowing formally to King Frederick before embracing Elena warmly. Cousin, I came as soon as I received word about these ridiculous accusations. Victoria stepped forward aggressively. Ambassador, your timing is quite remarkable. One might wonder if your arrival was coordinated with Princess Elena to present a unified response to legitimate security concerns. Eduardo's expression hardened as he turned to face Victoria. Your Majesty, I have come bearing information that completely exonerates my cousin and exposes the true nature of these accusations. He produced a leather portfolio from his travel bag, extracting several official documents with Valerian government seals. These are copies of all correspondence between Princess Elena and the Valerian embassy over the past 2 years. Every letter, every message, every communication has been reviewed by our foreign ministry. Alexander felt hope surge as Eduardo continued. Not one single document contains sensitive information about Asturian politics, military matters, or state secrets. Every communication consists of family news, charitable coordination, and cultural exchange proposals that were already public knowledge. Victoria's face was becoming increasingly pale as Eduardo laid out the evidence. Furthermore, the ambassador continued, we have evidence that suggests these accusations may have been fabricated by individuals seeking to damage Princess Elena's reputation for their own political purposes. The bombshell accusation hung in the air like a thunderclap. King Frederick leaned forward with keen interest while Victoria's composed facade began to crumble entirely. What evidence? Alexander demanded. Eduardo smiled grimly as he produced another document. 3 weeks ago, our embassy received an anonymous letter claiming that Princess Elena was planning to share Asturian military secrets with Valeria. The letter requested that we encourage such sharing for mutual benefit. Elena's shocked gasp echoed through the chamber. But that's completely fabricated. I would never— Of course you would never, Eduardo agreed, which is why our intelligence service investigated the source of this letter. The paper, ink, and writing style all indicate it originated from within the Asturian palace itself. Victoria's face had gone completely white. That proves nothing. Anyone could have written such a letter to create false evidence. True, Eduardo acknowledged, except that our investigation also revealed that similar letters have been sent to 3 other foreign embassies, all attempting to create evidence of Princess Elena's supposed disloyalty. The pattern suggests a coordinated campaign to manufacture treason charges. King Frederick's voice was deadly quiet when he spoke. Ambassador, are you suggesting that someone within this palace has been orchestrating false evidence against Princess Elena? I am not suggesting it, Your Majesty. I am stating it as documented fact. Someone with access to palace resources and knowledge of diplomatic procedures has been systematically attempting to frame Princess Elena for crimes she did not commit. The implications were staggering. If Eduardo's evidence was accurate, then Elena was not just innocent but the victim of an elaborate conspiracy, and the most likely architect of such a conspiracy stood in the room with them. Alexander turned to look at Victoria, whose face now showed open panic beneath her royal composure. Victoria, do you have any explanation for Ambassador Castellano's evidence? Victoria's response was defensive and increasingly desperate. This could all be fabricated by the Valerians to protect their asset. We cannot simply accept the word of a foreign government about matters of Asturian security. But even as she spoke, Alexander could see that her credibility was evaporating. The evidence Eduardo presented was too detailed and too consistent to dismiss as foreign fabrication. King Frederick struggled to his feet, his weakness forgotten in the face of this revelation. If what Ambassador Castellano says is true, then we are dealing not with Elena's treason, but with someone else's betrayal of justice itself. The confrontation was reaching its climax, but Alexander realized that proving Elena's innocence was only the beginning. If Victoria had indeed orchestrated this conspiracy, then the question became what to do about a queen regent who had attempted to destroy the crown prince's marriage for her own political advantage. The stakes had just become much higher than Elena's freedom. The very legitimacy of Victoria's regency was now in question, and with it the stability of the entire kingdom. The silence in the reception chamber stretched like a taut wire ready to snap. King Frederick stood with the support of his aide, his weathered face showing the strain of processing Ambassador Castellano's devastating revelations. Elena remained close to Alexander, her relief at vindication tempered by the growing realization of how deep the conspiracy against her had run. Victoria stood isolated, her royal composure cracking like ice under pressure. The evidence laid out before them painted a picture of systematic deception that went far beyond simple political maneuvering into outright fraud and attempted character assassination. "Ambassador Castellano," King Frederick said finally, his voice carrying the weight of royal authority despite his physical frailty. "These are serious allegations. Do you have additional evidence to support your claims?" Eduardo reached into his portfolio again, producing a small device that looked like a recording apparatus. "Your Majesty, 3 days ago we received another communication from the same anonymous source. This time, however, our intelligence service was prepared." He activated the device, and a crackling but clear voice filled the chamber. The words were spoken in accented English, clearly attempting to disguise the speaker's identity, but the content was unmistakable. "The princess remains a security threat to Astoria," the voice said. "Any evidence you can provide of her disloyalty would be welcomed by those who seek to protect the kingdom's interests. Financial compensation for such cooperation could be arranged." Elena's hand flew to her mouth in shock. "They were trying to bribe foreign officials to create false evidence against me?" Alexander felt rage building in his chest as he turned toward Victoria. "The voice is disguised, but the knowledge of palace protocol and diplomatic procedure suggests someone with high-level access." Victoria's response was immediate and defensive. "This proves nothing. Any number of people could have made such recordings. The Valerians could have fabricated this entire conversation to protect their operative." But her protests rang hollow in the face of Eduardo's systematic presentation of evidence. The ambassador produced yet another document, this one bearing official seals from multiple foreign governments. "Your Majesty, we were not the only embassy to receive such communications. The embassies of Nordmark, Thessalia, and Sylvonia all received similar approaches, all attempting to solicit evidence against Princess Elena. When we compared the timing and content of these communications, a pattern emerged that suggests coordination from a single source." King Frederick's aide whispered something in his ear, and the king's expression darkened further. "Ambassador, has your government shared this information with any other parties?" Eduardo's expression became grave. "Your Majesty, the implications of this conspiracy are so serious that my government felt obligated to inform the International Court of Royal Affairs. If substantiated, these actions could constitute grounds for formal diplomatic sanctions against Astoria." The threat of international intervention sent shockwaves through the room. Alexander realized that Victoria's conspiracy had not only threatened Elena personally, but potentially damaged Astoria's standing among neighboring kingdoms. The diplomatic consequences could take years to repair. Victoria's panic was now barely controlled. "This is outrageous. We are being manipulated by foreign powers who seek to undermine Astoria's sovereignty. King Frederick, surely you cannot accept the word of foreign agents over your own regent?" King Frederick's response was slow but devastating. "Victoria, I would accept your word over foreign agents, but you have not denied these allegations. You have only questioned their source." The challenge hung in the air like a sword. Alexander watched Victoria's face as she realized that her husband was demanding a direct denial of the charges, something that would either clear her name or expose her to perjury accusations. "Frederick," Victoria began, her voice losing its royal authority and becoming almost pleading, "you must understand the pressures I have been under. The kingdom needed strong leadership during your illness. Elena's foreign connections created legitimate security concerns." "That is not a denial," King Frederick observed quietly. Victoria's composure finally shattered completely. She was becoming too popular. The people were beginning to look to her for leadership instead of to the rightful regent. Her influence was undermining the stability of the crown during a critical period. The confession struck the room like lightning. Alexander felt Elena's hand grip his arm as the full scope of Victoria's motivations became clear. This had never been about security or treason. It had been about power and jealousy, dressed up in the language of patriotic duty. "So you attempted to destroy her reputation through fabricated evidence?" Alexander asked, his voice deadly quiet. Victoria's response was defensive and increasingly desperate. "I sought to address a legitimate security concern through appropriate investigative channels. If that investigation revealed uncomfortable truths, that was not my fault." "Except there were no uncomfortable truths," Eduardo interjected. only lies manufactured to create the appearance of guilt where none existed. King Frederick moved slowly to his throne-like chair, the effort clearly exhausting him, but his authority remained absolute. Victoria, you have confessed to orchestrating false accusations against my daughter-in-law based on personal and political motivations rather than legitimate security concerns. The king's formal tone indicated that this had moved beyond family dispute into official royal business. Alexander realized that his father was about to render judgment not just on the accusations against Elena, but on Victoria's fitness to serve as regent. Furthermore, the king continued, your actions have damaged Astoria's relationships with multiple allied nations and brought international scrutiny upon our internal affairs. The consequences of your conspiracy extend far beyond this palace. Victoria's last attempt at maintaining authority came out as a desperate plea. Frederick, everything I did was for the protection of the crown. Elena's growing influence threatened the traditional power structures that have kept this kingdom stable for centuries. Elena's influence, King Frederick replied, consisted of charitable work, diplomatic courtesy, and kindness to our people. If you considered such qualities threatening, then perhaps you should examine your own fitness for leadership. The judgment was clear and final. Alexander felt a mixture of relief and sadness as he watched his stepmother's political destruction unfold. Whatever her motivations, Victoria had been part of his family for 16 years, and her fall from grace was tragic, even if it was necessary. Captain Webb appeared at the chamber entrance again, his timing suggesting he had been monitoring the situation closely. Your Majesty, Commander Blackwood is requesting orders regarding Princess Elena's status. King Frederick's response was immediate and decisive. Princess Elena's status remains unchanged. She is the Crown Prince's wife and future Queen of Astoria, with all rights and privileges pertaining to that position. Commander Blackwood will return his guards to normal duties immediately. And Your Majesty, Webb continued carefully, what are your instructions regarding the Queen Regent's security detail? The question addressed the elephant in the room. If Victoria was no longer trusted with regent authority, her personal guard force became a potential security threat rather than a protection. King Frederick's answer revealed the depth of his consideration. Commander Blackwood's appointment is hereby terminated. Captain Webb, you will resume full authority over palace security. The Queen Regent's personal guard will be disbanded and reassigned to regular duties. Victoria's face went ashen as she realized the full scope of her fall from power. Frederick, you cannot simply dismiss me as regent without proper legal proceedings. The Privy Council appointed me to this position during your incapacity. The Privy Council appointed you during a medical emergency, the king corrected. That appointment was always subject to my recovery and resumed authority. I am now resuming full royal duties. Alexander felt amazement at his father's resilience and strategic thinking. King Frederick had allowed Victoria to believe he was too weak to challenge her authority while actually gathering information and planning his response. Your Majesty, Alexander said, are you certain you are ready to resume full duties? The doctors emphasized the importance of complete rest for your recovery. King Frederick smiled, the expression transforming his face and revealing glimpses of the vigorous ruler he had once been. My recovery has been more complete than anyone realized, including myself. Watching this conspiracy unfold provided the motivation I needed to regain my strength and clarity. Elena stepped forward and curtsied formally. Your Majesty, I am deeply grateful for your trust and support. I pledge to continue serving Astoria and its people with complete loyalty and dedication. Elena, the king replied warmly, you have already proven your character through how you handled these accusations. A lesser person might have crumbled under such pressure, or responded with bitterness. Your grace and dignity have honored our family. Victoria made one final attempt to salvage her position. Frederick, if you resume full duties immediately after this stress, you risk another stroke or worse. The kingdom needs stable leadership, not a ruler who might collapse under pressure. The concern might have been genuine, but the timing made it appear manipulative rather than caring. King Frederick's response was firm. Victoria, my health is my responsibility. Your responsibility now is to accept the consequences of your actions. Ambassador Castellano cleared his throat diplomatically. Your Majesty, my government will need to inform our allies about the resolution of this matter. The international implications require careful handling. Alexander understood the diplomatic complexity. Astoria's reputation had been damaged by the conspiracy, but the kingdom's handling of the crisis could either restore confidence or deepen international concerns about internal stability. Ambassador, King Frederick addressed Eduardo formally, please convey to your government and our other allies that Astoria has addressed this internal matter decisively and completely. Princess Elena's loyalty to our kingdom is absolute, and she continues to enjoy our full confidence and support. The formal statement would help repair diplomatic damage, but Alexander knew that rebuilding trust would take time and consistent action. Victoria's conspiracy had created wounds that would need careful tending. As if reading his thoughts, Elena spoke quietly to the group. Your Majesty, I believe this experience has taught us all valuable lessons about communication, trust, and the importance of addressing concerns directly rather than allowing misunderstandings to fester. Her diplomatic response offered a path forward that focused on lessons learned rather than punishment and revenge. Alexander admired her ability to find constructive elements even in such a destructive situation. King Frederick nodded approvingly. Elena speaks wisely. We must learn from this crisis and use it to strengthen our family and our kingdom, rather than allowing it to divide us permanently. Victoria's response was quiet and bitter. It is easy to speak of forgiveness when you have emerged victorious. Victoria, the king said gently, you will always be my wife and Alexander's stepmother. Your mistakes do not erase 16 years of marriage or family bonds. But trust, once broken, must be rebuilt through actions rather than words. The offer of personal reconciliation, despite political consequences, revealed King Frederick's character and provided Victoria with a path back to family acceptance if she chose to take it. Alexander realized that his father had handled the entire crisis with a wisdom that balanced justice with mercy, politics with family loyalty, and firmness with compassion. The morning that had begun with threats and accusations was ending with truth revealed and relationships clarified. As the group began to disperse, Elena turned to Alexander with tears of relief in her eyes. I never doubted that you would protect me, but I feared what that protection might cost you. Alexander took her hands in his, no longer caring who observed their intimate moment. Some things are worth any cost. Our marriage, our love, and our commitment to justice are more important than crowns or titles. King Frederick's voice carried across the chamber with warm approval. Alexander, that response proves you will make an excellent king when the time comes. A ruler who understands that true power comes from serving others rather than dominating them. The crisis was over, but Alexander knew that the real work was just beginning. Rebuilding trust, healing relationships, and strengthening the kingdom would require sustained effort from all of them. But for the first time in months, he felt confident that they could face those challenges together as a united family and a stable kingdom. Outside the palace walls, the sun was finally breaking through the morning clouds, casting warm light through the ancient windows and illuminating the faces of those who had survived the storm together. The royal family of Astoria had faced its greatest internal crisis in generations and emerged stronger, wiser, and more united than before. The ultimatum that had begun as Victoria's attempt to destroy Elena had instead revealed the true character of everyone involved, proving that sometimes the greatest threats come from within, but so does the greatest strength for overcoming them.